The big buildings, the 20-story, 15-story buildings, we're not hearing any reports of them toppling over or having major catastrophic damage to them, which is good. The hotels and the power companies and the big government buildings there seem to have come through this very well.
I'm going to wrap you up there. Thank you, Dan, for that report. Of course, there'll be continuing breaking news coverage on this earthquake. I'm Dana Perino. Up next, here's Shep.
It's 3 o'clock on the East Coast, 11 a.m. in Anchorage, where a massive 7.0 earthquake has struck the state's largest city. And it's not over yet. The aftershocks are still shaking the community. President Trump in Argentina meeting with world leaders and defending his past business dealings with Russia. The president also signing a trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. He's calling it one of the most important trade deals in the history of the world. Of course, it's not even done. And analysts say it's not all that different at all from the NAFTA deal that he hated so much. Reporting begins now.
Breaking news. Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
And our reporting begins with coverage from the Alaska earthquake, where a 7-magnitude quake rocked the state's largest city in Anchorage. About 300,000 people live there. So far, no reports of anyone killed or badly injured. Police say there is major infrastructure damage across the city. This is Minnesota Drive. We're told it's a pretty major road in Anchorage. You can see parts of it collapse this morning. Cops say it's a similar story across much of the city, with roads and bridges closed and a lot of buildings and homes damaged. A look here inside television station KTVA, the newsroom here. We haven't gotten a lot of reports. They had a bunch of awards on the wall. You can see they're on the floor now. Reporters and producers went up on Facebook to give us a look around. That's a studio camera. Ooh, expensive replacement. And they were recording when an aftershock hit.
I'll be honest, the aftershock, I think we were outside, so we were down here until it completely stopped, and then that's when...
Whoa, we were getting another aftershock now?
Get under the desk. Come on, get in here, man. All right, another aftershock.
All right, guys, you just experienced a live aftershock. That was, we did exactly what we told you to do. We got under the desk.
Yeah, man.
We are,
This isn't too bad.
Well, no question, this earthquake was a very strong one. Initial reports had it at a 6.6, and later they raised that to a 7.0, which the United States Geological Survey notes is about 4 times stronger. Crews are still assessing the damage, still making sure everybody's okay. Government offices have closed. More than 100 schools sent kids home. This struck at about 8:30 in the morning. And rebuilding and recovering will likely be measured in at least months. For now, though, at least, reasons to be grateful. Nobody reported dead, and folks who live in Alaska, no doubt, as tough as they come. Trace Gallagher reporting from our West Coast News Hub. Trace.
And the communications are getting back online now, Shep, so a lot of the information we're getting here is coming in real time. Let's begin with kind of a checklist of that primary infrastructure you mentioned. Aside from clear damage to roads and bridges and buildings, a lot of the major access roads are either open and flowing or in the process of being reopened, though we were just notified the Seward Highway has now been shut down because of a rock slide. That's one of the primary arteries to the Kenai Peninsula. Though residents are being told all across the city to stay put for the time being, and there are numerous reports of water main breaks around the area. No evidence to suggest the water is unsafe to drink, but experts say it's better to err on the side of caution and drink bottled water if possible. As for electricity, there are reports of widespread power outages across the greater Anchorage area, though one of the primary substations, we're told, has now just gone back online, and so far there are no reports of power lines being down. That's very good news for first responders trying to get to the various business districts and neighborhoods to help those who may be in need and then survey the damage. The runways at the Anchorage airport are not damaged, and they are accepting incoming flights, but flights are not taking off, and the roads to and from the airport are damaged, so you can't get there and you can't leave. And we've just been notified that Alaska Airlines, the major carrier in and out of Anchorage, has now suspended operations. The air traffic control tower is in operation, but because of the aftershocks, the controllers are not in the tower. They're in a vehicle near the tarmac getting the last flights coming in. We should note the Alaska pipeline has also been shut down, but only as a precaution. No indication of any damage to the line. And as you mentioned, school children are being gathered at various shelters around the area where parents are being notified about their children's whereabouts. Many parents clearly are not in a position right now to pick up their kids, so the kids can stay at these shelters as long as they need to be there. As a point of reference, Alaska is about the most earthquake-prone place on the planet. In fact, if you look at the U.S. Geological Survey charts, you can see Alaska has small tremblers about every 15 minutes. Now, most of them you cannot feel. Today's was a monster, 7.0 magnitude. That's much bigger than the San Francisco earthquake in 1989. In fact, 3 times bigger, and it's about twice the size as the Northridge quake in 1994. Today's quake was centered 8.5 miles outside of Anchorage, meaning it was very close, and it was about 25 miles deep. That's a moderately deep quake, which is good news because while it can be felt across a much wider area, being that wide means the Earth kind of helps dissipate a lot of the quake's energy. Again, the communications are just kind of getting back on. We're getting some firsthand information, Shep. As we get more, we'll kind of keep you updated on what's going on up in the Anchorage area. So far, it's not a good picture. Shep.
Yeah, sounds like it. Trace, thanks. That earthquake hit at 8:30 local time this morning, which is an hour and 15 minutes before sunrise. You know, the days are real short this time of year in Anchorage. So sunrise was at 9:45. The sun's going to set before 4 o'clock this afternoon, so they'll have less than 6 hours of light. And I say this because they want to try to get all that they can get done before the sun goes down in the way of cleanup and making sure that everybody's okay. Let's turn to Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who's good enough to join us now from Capitol Hill. What are you hearing from home, Senator?
Well, it is a very serious mess in Alaska. It's a tragedy. As you know, 7.0 on the Richter scale is a huge earthquake. We do have a lot of earthquakes in Alaska, but this magnitude that we have seen is really very, very troubling. The early reports are very concerning in terms of damage to infrastructure, the roads, the concern about power being out. It's cold at home right now. It's about 25. There's snow on the ground, and the damage that we are seeing is really quite concerning. We've got resources that are coming together as we speak and are sparing no effort to ensure that there is a coordinated response. But this has been a very, very, very hard wake-up call for the population center of our state, centered there in Anchorage.
The governor has declared a state of emergency. I've just read while you were speaking. Senator, I wonder what sort of federal assistance may be warranted. Do you even know yet?
We don't know. Again, so much of this is just preliminary as we're getting those reports in. We're getting pictures that are being posted on Facebook, but we know that the damage to infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, particularly in this area, are a great concern. There's damage to the schools. It is a big, big issue.
Senator Murkowski, let you catch your breath there. I'm going to go to Alaska for a minute. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska with us. Let's go over to Alaska. Chris Woodruff is with us. He says he was on the 10th floor of an office building in Anchorage when the earthquake hit. He's from Tacoma, Washington, but travels to Anchorage for business. How you doing?
Doing good, Shep. How are you?
What was it like? 10th floor. That's a high for an Anchorage building, huh?
Well, it's pretty high. I have to admit, I was pretty scared. I've been through earthquakes before. Went through the Nisqually quake in Tacoma back in the early 2000s, which was pretty intense. But this was much, much more intense and really got my attention.
Do you have a sense for how long it shook there? I've heard people saying it seemed to go on forever, which I guess they all do.
Yeah, I would have said the same thing, but I would say 2 minutes or so. And
wow,
literally
that's a long time.
Yeah, and while I was on hold here waiting while the senator was talking, I could feel aftershocks. So we're still getting aftershocks, and it's been a pretty intense morning.
What was happening around you as things were shaking? What were you seeing and hearing?
Well, my first thought was to get away from the windows. I've got an office with a lot of windows, and I got away from the windows and went into the doorway. It was still dark outside. I looked out over the city, and I could see a lot of pops. So I assumed there were transformers that were going out. And then all my colleagues were coming out of their offices and, trying to get to a position where they were going to be safe and figure out what was going on. So I thought it would pass quickly, but it just seemed to go on.
Yeah, our viewers are looking this video, and we've been putting it up. I don't know if you can re-rack this part right here, but the first time I saw it, I didn't realize the significance of it. But you'll notice on the horizon, on the right-hand side of the screen. Now watch the horizon there on the right. See where it's tilted? So there's that flash there, and then watch all the lights. It looks like power is out all over the place.
I was actually surprised. I'm sure power did go out in many areas, but I was actually surprised the power was on in as many areas as it was. So I fully expected power to go out, but it didn't in our building. We have a large bank building right across from us. Power did go out in their building, but they seemed to be the only ones. Right around them, everybody else had power. So it was a little bit odd traveling through town. Heading towards the airport now, trying to see if I can get out, which doesn't look like I'm going to.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be easy today at any rate. But I was wondering, sometimes earthquakes feel like it's rolling. Sometimes it feels like a sledgehammer. What did this quake feel like?
This felt like a tremble. It was this constant shaking. And it didn't seem like a roll where it was cyclic. It was just constant trembling.
And then the aftershocks have been frequent. I'm seeing here that they had aftershocks as high as a 5.4, which as aftershocks go is nothing to sneeze at.
No, some of them have been very short, but some of them have been a little bit longer, especially right after the initial earthquake. There was a pretty good aftershock, I'd say, within 10 or 15 minutes that had me back in the doorway again.
So our understanding is that the airport is kind of minimalist at the moment, that getting around, there is some infrastructure damage on the roads and that sort of thing. I don't guess you have a sense yet for big picture what it's like around town.
I don't. I have been listening to the radio, and there are a lot of reports of gas line breaks, water breaks. Apparently, the airport has had a water break, and there's something going on out at the, I guess, in the terminal building or the tower.
Yeah.
So I heard that the ramp that goes up to the departures level of the airport is closed, and they're saying to stay out of the parking garage, which is where I have to return my rental car, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do there. But, yeah, it's still a dynamic situation.
Good luck. Chris Woodruff, mighty good of you to call in. Really appreciate it on the line with us from Anchorage. Back to Senator Murkowski, who's with us from Alaska. Do you have a sense for when we're going to have a handle on how widespread it is, how bad it is, and who needs what?
Well, that review is beginning as we speak. It began several hours ago. I've already spoken with the regional head of FEMA. The director is on his way to Alaska, along with the second in command of FEMA, Peter Gaynor, who will be on site. They're working already with the local resource management team that is on the ground, the state and local teams that are in place already. But we know that a tragedy of this magnitude is going to require outside resources. So as we begin this initial assessment, again, the governor has declared a disaster. We will work on our end here to ensure that we have whatever resources may be called upon to assist in the aftermath of this quake. But as of this point in time, we don't know the full extent that we're dealing with.
We don't. Senator, we're almighty thankful around here to learn that we have no reports of serious injuries and certainly no reports of deaths, and we hope it stays that way. It would be a silver lining for sure. All the best to our friends in Alaska on getting it back together.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that. We appreciate the prayers of so many. We're going to need them in the aftermath here. Thank you.
Senator Lisa Murkowski, senator from Alaska, where they are having a short but difficult day. Ahead, more coverage of that powerful earthquake. We'll check in with our chief meteorologist Rick Reichmuth.
All across Alaska has been shut down because the main substation in Anchorage was flooded, and that's kind of shut that whole thing down. So now across the state of Alaska, if you want to take a train, you're pretty much out of luck. We talked earlier about how the airport is accepting incoming traffic, those planes that were already on their way, but Alaska Airlines, the biggest carrier into that region, has now suspended its operations for the time being. So for all intents and purposes, even though the air traffic control tower is open, there are no controllers in the tower. So for all intents and purposes, the airport is shut down and nobody's being allowed to either leave the airport or get into the airport. We're being told by the fire department, and this is significant, there were 3 fires after the earthquake. All have been put out, no injuries, no major damage, and the fire department is saying that they have now gone around the city and have not seen significant structural damage in the city of Anchorage. That's amazing. I mean, the mayor has kind of echoed that, saying that having gone through this size earthquake and not having any major structural damage is a testament to how prepared they have been. And if you don't know, Alaska gets earthquakes pretty much every 15 minutes. Temblors it is. You can feel some, you can't feel some. And the building codes in Alaska are among the most stringent in the country, maybe the most strict in the entire country. And this is really a very strong statement in favor of that. We should also point out that there is no damage to the port of Alaska. That's a big deal because you have a lot of industry going in and out of there. And even though we've been told this earthquake lasted more than a minute, maybe a minute and a half, remember it was fairly deep, 25 miles. So that energy spread for a long ways. It was felt as far as 400 miles away. And if the earthquake is shallow, say it's 3, 4, 5 miles, it's kind of akin to someone grabbing a blanket and shaking the blanket. You know, the ripples you get? That's what happens when the earthquake is shallow. That's what happens to the ground. And then in an earthquake this size, 7.0, you really worry a lot about liquefaction. That's where it shakes so hard and so volatile for so long that the ground just turns to liquid. We did not have that in this case, and just getting these damage reports early on, it shows that you know, the roads you can see are bad. Transportation right now is bad. Power's in the process of getting back on, but the fire department says no major structural damage in the city of Anchorage, which is astounding. Shep.
Wow, that's great. Trace Gallagher live from the West Coast. Thanks. We've just gotten a presidential tweet on the matter. The president, of course, down in Buenos Aires, and he just tweeted, "To the great people of Alaska, you've been hit by a big one. Please follow the directions of highly trained professionals who are there to help you. Your federal government," says the president, "will spare no expense. God bless you all." An earthquake every 15 minutes in Alaska. Did not know that. Learned something new from Trace Gallagher, but not too horrible. Other places, everything came off the shelves. Our chief meteorologist Rick Reichmuth is live in the Extreme Weather Center with a look at the aftershocks, and there have been plenty, huh?
Yeah, there will continue to be. I mean, sometimes aftershocks from one big quake can go on even for a couple of years afterwards. This one, probably not that big of a quake. This is an idea. This is kind of automatically plots onto the map from the USGS. The red is the last hour. You can see we've got some of that right up right where this quake is. Past 12 hours, you can see we've had some Wyoming. Probably didn't even know that happened right here off the coast of Oregon. Nothing related to this quake right here. The reason why this has been so concerning is Anchorage is just right here on the other side here of the Cook Inlet. That right there was the big earthquake that hit. You get an idea how many quakes there have been in the last 12 hours right in this exact same area, Shep. The land will continue to settle after that big one. Because of this quake, this is initially where we had the tsunami warning all here along the Cook Inlet. Sometimes you can have an earthquake so big across the Pacific that those tsunami waves can travel all the way across the Pacific. We had one in Chile a few years ago that we saw tsunami waves in across Southern California. Not the case this time. They issued the warning. They have let that expire. So that warning is gone, and we're not expecting any tsunami. What we have now is about 4 hours left of daylight to get out there and see the damages and make sure everybody's okay. Shep?
Rick, thank you. Gabrielle Black is with us now. She works as a waitress and was in the middle of taking somebody's order when the earthquake hit this morning. Had to hide under a counter. How are you?
Hi, Shep. I'm better now.
How was it at that moment? Tell me about the place and what you were doing, and take us through it.
Absolutely. Oh, my gosh. Okay, we're having another earthquake. Sorry. Okay.
Just an aftershock?
Yeah, oh my gosh, okay. I'm so sorry. So it's terrifying, and you have to act quickly. But
What did you do?
Actually, I'm sorry. I work at Middleway. I was at Middleway, and
what is Middleway?
Middleway Cafe. It's this really cute cafe that has vegan alternative meals and gluten alternative meals, and you can sit in there, and it's really nice. And there's tons of art displayed. But while I was taking an order, you hear this noise, and you look around and you see things shaking. And so at first you're thinking, okay, it's going to pass. Oh, we have an earthquake, not a big deal. But then you start feeling the horrific shock of just this. You're just moving and you can't help it. Oh my gosh! And the earthquake is still going. And so after feeling, being moved around, you just go for anywhere that you can hide, basically. So I just shoved everything that was under this counter and just curled up in a ball and grabbed my neck. And all my coworkers and I were shouting out, get under a table, because we get people. Oh, sorry, we get people all the time that come from out of state. So we were just shouting out, get under the tables just in case someone didn't actually know.
Nobody got hurt, right?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
That's the best news of all, Gabrielle. I'm mighty glad you're good, and hope things get back to normal. PDQ, really appreciate it. We'll have continuing updates from Alaska throughout the afternoon here, and before sunset, which is probably 3 or 4 hours away, we expect to get some further updates from there on situations in areas maybe that are a little. Trump now, he's far from Washington, but still feeling the shockwaves from the bombshell back home in the Russia investigation. After insisting on the campaign trail that he had no ties to Moscow, the president now says he was lightly looking at building a Trump Tower there. And according to the news website BuzzFeed, the Trump organization was ready to give the Russian President Vladimir Putin the $50 million penthouse. There are reports that the special counsel Robert Mueller is looking into President Trump's children as well, not just Don Jr., but Ivanka. It also comes after President Trump's longtime personal lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen flipped, spoke with the Mueller team for some 70 hours, and admitted in court that he lied to Congress about his contacts with the Russians, in essence to follow the president's political narrative. Cohen confessed he was in talks with Putin's right-hand man and spokesman about the Moscow project during the 2016 campaign. At the same time, the Russians were interfering with our election and targeting President Trump's opponent. Of course, President Trump is in Argentina right now for the G20 summit with world leaders. He was supposed to have a meeting with Vladimir Putin, but after the Cohen news broke yesterday, the optics, President Trump abruptly canceled it. The president claimed he was canceling the sit-down because of an incident at sea between Russia and Ukraine. According to the Kremlin, the presidents Trump and Putin will still have some sort of informal meeting on the sidelines of this summit. And take a look at this remarkable moment caught on the camera at the summit. That's Putin and the Saudi Crown Prince MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, two men accused of killing their political opponents, sharing a laugh and enthusiastic handshake. It's MBS who the CIA has said is the one who murdered Jamal Khashoggi, or at least ordered it. John Roberts reporting. He's live in Buenos Aires. Hello, John.
And then I'll continue. Shep, good afternoon to you. And it's interesting when you take a look at some of Donald Trump's most recent big international trips. This one, his summit with Putin in Helsinki and the G20 in Hamburg last year, all marked by the Russia investigation suddenly becoming the headline, as opposed to what the president was doing with world leaders. And again, here in Argentina, we see the same thing. We do know that Robert Mueller asked the president a question about what he knew about the development of Trump Tower in Moscow and who he talked about it. Now we're learning that Robert Mueller is also looking into one involvement the president's children, Don Jr. and Ivanka, might have had in that. Don Jr., when he appeared before the Senate Intelligence Intelligence Committee, said that he was peripherally aware of what Michael Cohen was doing in terms of researching a potential Trump Tower in Moscow. He also said that he himself, Don Jr., through the Trump Organization, had been trying to develop some sort of real estate properties in Russia going back to 2011. According to Yahoo News, his sister Ivanka was also involved in that effort, but that effort ended in 2013. That was 2 years before the president declared that he was going to be running for president. Now to this idea of a $50 million penthouse for Vladimir Putin. Felix Sater, who is a real estate promoter and convicted felon, he was also one of the driving forces behind this idea of a Trump Tower, said that it was his idea to float the idea to Vladimir Putin to give him a $50 million penthouse for free, figuring that all of the other Russian oligarchs out there would want to go live where Vladimir Putin is living. Sater apparently has tried this before, giving away apartments to celebrities to try to entice people to come in. He called it a marketing ploy. One of the people, according to reports, that he tried to do this with was Madonna, though nobody could reach her for comment about what happened. Source close to the president says that the president knew nothing about this offer to Putin, and that at any rate it was a really stupid idea. Shep?
What's the White House saying about this canceled official Putin meeting?
Well, it's more what the Kremlin is saying about it than what the White House is saying about it. The Kremlin today casting doubt on this idea that it was about the Russian aggression against Ukraine, suggesting that it was domestic politics back in the United States that were responsible for it. You mentioned this idea of the optics of meeting with President Putin after this Cohen business came out yesterday. Sarah Sanders issued a statement saying, quote, the Russian witch hunt hoax, which hopefully now is nearing an end, is doing very well. Unfortunately, it probably does undermine our relationship with Russia. However, the reason for our canceled meeting is Ukraine. Hopefully that will be resolved soon so the productive conversations can begin. The president also weighing in more on the Cohen plea today, insisting that he did nothing wrong, saying, quote, in a tweet, oh, I get it. I'm a very good developer, happily living my life. When I see our country going in the wrong direction, to put it mildly, against all odds, I decided to run for president and continue to run my business. Very legal and very cool. Talked about it on the campaign trail, lightly looked at doing a building somewhere in Russia, put up zero money, zero guarantees, and didn't do the project witch hunt. And also, according to White House officials, the president briefly encountered Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, today. They didn't really have much of a conversation. They exchanged pleasantries, but there was an encounter between Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, and MBS, in which Macron seemed very stern and seemed to send a very clear message to MBS, one that our president has not yet.
John Roberts reporting from Buenos Aires. Let's turn to the Fox News Sunday host, Chris Wallace, on all things, all of this. How you doing? Simi Valley, eh?
Yeah, we're out at the Reagan Library for the Reagan Defense Forum, and it's just a glorious day here. If you haven't come, you should. It's up on a mountaintop in the Simi Valley of California, and it's also where President Reagan and Mrs. Reagan have been laid to rest. So it's a beautiful spot. There may be troubles all over the world, but not here in Simi Valley.
What's your take, Chris, on yesterday's developments in Russia? I didn't get to talk to you yesterday.
No. Look, it certainly doesn't look good. And here's the president of the United States as a candidate in 2016. And, you know, people talk about now in the White House, talk about Michael Cohen as if he was this very much a subsidiary figure and not very important. He was the president's fixer. I mean, the very fact that he was negotiating about the Trump Tower in Moscow, the very fact that he was dealing with hush payments to Karen McDougal and to Stormy Daniels gives you an indication of how important he was in terms of some of the being a fixer for the president in some messy business. Now, having said that, there's nothing illegal with the president. It may seem politically foolish, but there's nothing illegal at all with the president as a candidate. He was running the Trump Organization to be floating this idea of a Trump Tower in Moscow at the same time that he was running for the presidency of the United States. On the other hand, it obviously raises questions about whether there were financial obligations, whether there were connections that we didn't know about. And between this and also the information we got this week that Jerome Corsi, a friend of Roger Stone, another advisor to the president, was in touch with WikiLeaks and getting information for them at the same time that Stone was talking to the president, it just draws some connections. There's no illegality here. It's all smoke, but there's more smoke this week.
Do you have a sense now, many who are following this are suggesting now that Judge Napolitano, for one, yesterday said this is just the tip of an iceberg. You don't start with this. There would be no reason to charge him again except to lay a marker. It just, we know we're going to go to at least the middle of March now, because it's going to take that long for Manafort.
Look, there's an old line when I covered the Reagan White House. It's appropriate to say here, those who know aren't talking. Those who talk don't know. Nobody outside of the special counsel's office knows what he's got and how he's going to proceed. And I know there's a lot of talk, well, this is going to be done by the end of the year. We were saying this at the end of 2017, so the idea that this will be done in the next month, I don't think anybody has a clue. But it's clear, this much is clear, is that because none of us on the outside knew about this. None of us knew that he had this information from Michael Cohen, and nobody knows what he said in an estimated 70 hours of talks with the special counsel's probe. But clearly, Robert Mueller and his team know a lot more than we know, and we're going to have to wait to find out whether it is substantive or not. But clearly, there is a group of people around the president who have lied to Congress or lied in other situations and had much. And what are they lying about? About their ties to Russia.
Chris, we'll be watching you this weekend. Looks like you got a big show coming. This Sunday, Chris will be live from the Reagan Library there in Simi Valley, north of L.A. Two big guests this week after the G20 summit wraps in Argentina. That's the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the Democratic Senator Ben Cardin, a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. That's this Sunday on Fox News Sunday on your local Fox station. Check your local TV listings. Coming up, we'll head back to Buenos Aires as America signs a new trade deal with Mexico and Canada. Actually, the NAFTA framework is still exactly largely intact, with some changes for cars and labor and the environment. And this deal, this new deal, is not a deal yet because it still has to overcome some major obstacles before it will ever be able to achieve much of anything. All three countries' governments have to ratify the agreement. Right now, Canada and Mexico are in disagreements with the United States over import taxes on steel and aluminum. That did not get worked out. And here in the United States, the agreement faces a very much uphill battle in the U.S. Congress because they won't do anything on it till next year. And by then, Democrats will be in control of the House. Then expect side deals if there's any deal at all. The Fox Business Network's Blake Berman reporting. He's live in Argentina.
Controversy and big discussion here, big movement.
Hi there, Shepard. Still a whole lot in play here as you just tick through, but no doubt about it, this was a celebratory moment for President Trump here in Buenos Aires earlier this morning. As you know, he campaigned for years and has talked about it for years as well, about getting rid of NAFTA. And this morning, he was able to sign into place its possible replacement, the USMCA. The president describing it as a win for North America and at home, a win for the ag and auto industries.
In short, this is a model agreement that changes the trade landscape forever. And this is an agreement that, first and foremost, benefits working people, something of great importance to all three of us here today.
Congress is going to have its say going forward on this in a couple different ways. First, they're going to be able to work with the White House, talk with the White House, potentially negotiate with the White House as to how to actually implement the thing going forward. And then after that, both the House of Representatives, Democratic controlled in 2019, and the Senate will have a vote on it. Chuck Schumer noting that process in a statement earlier today, saying the following, quote, "Thankfully, the Congress has a role in crafting, implementing legislation to make sure the deal benefits and protects middle-class families and working people and isn't simply a rebranding of the same policies that hurt our economy and workers for years." The president's top trade rep, Bob Lighthizer, earlier today here in Buenos Aires said that they feel no doubt about it that Democrats will come on board. But, Shepard, they might also have to convince some Republicans as well. For example, Senator Marco Rubio came out on Twitter earlier today calling the USMCA, quote, unacceptable. Shepard.
The president set to meet with President Xi of China, yes?
He is. That is going to be the big meeting tomorrow night. It's a dinner between the two. And leading into this, the president's sending a couple of different mixed signals. Yesterday, when he was asked about a potential trade deal, the president said of it, quote, "I don't know that I want to do it." But today, he had a much different tone.
We'll be meeting with China, as you know. Yes, we'll be meeting tomorrow, and we've already spoken. And we're working very hard. If we could make a deal, that'd be good. I think they want to, and I think we'd like to, and we'll see.
Lighthizer today as well, Shepard, made some news saying that he feels that this dinner meeting, could end up with a, quote, positive feeling. But a positive feeling, a trade truce, a trade deal, three very different things. Shepard.
Blake Berman reporting from Buenos Aires. Coming up, back-to-back hearings in Washington. Mueller's team facing off against Manafort, and the Fed say more charges could be coming. And then there's the former FBI Director James Comey. He's asking a judge to throw out a subpoena from House Republicans. Wilson told a federal judge that they're considering more charges against President Trump's former campaign chairman. Manafort's plea deal fell apart after the government says he repeatedly lied to investigators. Paul Manafort is one of 33 people pleading guilty or facing charges in Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. He denies lying to the feds. Catherine Herridge reporting live from Washington.
We have new information this morning from inside the federal court here in Washington. The judge, Amy Jackson, setting a target date for sentencing of March 5th. Paul Manafort's legal team arrived this morning at the courthouse for the short hearing without speaking to reporters. The special counsel now has until December 7th, until next week, to explain allegations that the plea deal fell apart because Manafort lied and did not fully cooperate. Special counsel prosecutor Andrew Weissman said they are considering more criminal charges against Manafort, including offenses he admitted to but was never charged with. Manafort's team accuses the special counsel of pressure tactics and wanting information that their client does not have or cannot provide. Separately, Fox News has learned special counsel investigators pressed Manafort on the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting and specifically the involvement of the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. That Trump Tower meeting is back in focus with the Michael Cohen plea, the plea from the president's former personal attorney, because Cohen acknowledged negotiations over the Moscow real estate project were happening at the same time as the Trump Tower meeting, though there's no public evidence of a connection at this time, Shep.
Catherine, we're watching another hearing in Washington. This time it involves the former FBI Director James Comey. Lawyers for Comey are asking a federal judge to throw out a subpoena from House Republicans, demanding he testify in front of the House Judiciary Oversight Committees next week. The former FBI Director's legal team says he's perfectly willing to talk to them, but he wants to do it in public. He says a closed-door hearing could lead to selective leaking. What about that, Catherine?
That's right. Comey's lawyers are still in court at this hour fighting this congressional subpoena to answer questions under oath behind closed doors about his actions during the 2016 presidential campaign, including the Clinton emails, the Clinton Foundation, and the catalyst and the early stages for the Russia investigation. His attorneys accused Republicans in court filings of issuing the subpoena as part of, quote, a poisonous combination of presidential tweets and the selective leaking that has become standard practice. The committee's Republican chairman, Bob Goodlatte, said today the pushback makes clear Comey doesn't want to answer detailed questions.
He is trying to run the clock on us, and that's why we think he's filed this motion to quash. They also, Fusion GPS also tried that. They were knocked down, and instead he came in, Glenn Simpson came in and took the fifth.
Fusion GPS is the firm that was behind the anti-Trump dossier, and it is somewhat ironic that Comey is making accusations about leaking because his own decision to release memos to the media and kickstart the special counsel investigation is under probe by the Inspector General at the Justice Department right now.
Catherine Herridge reporting from Washington. Hackers may have stolen the personal information of as many as 500 million guests who stayed at one of the world's largest hotel chains. Marriott reports in some cases that includes credit card numbers, birthdays, addresses, even passport numbers. The Fox Business Network's Hillary Vaughn reporting live.
Hi, Shepard. Marriott says any guest that made reservations at a Starwood brand hotel on or before September 10th of this year could be caught up in this breach. This was not a one-time hit. They discovered outsiders had been grabbing information for years from this database. Hackers took information, including names, mailing addresses, but even passport numbers, your stay preferences that would be listed in your Starwood profile, even credit card numbers and expiration dates. Marriott says credit card info was encrypted, but there's no guarantee that it's protected. Marriott apologized for this breach in a statement, and they're working hard to make sure.
Told a federal judge that they're considering more charges against President Trump's former campaign chairman. Manafort's plea deal fell apart after the government says he repeatedly lied to investigators. Paul Manafort is one of 33 people pleading guilty or facing charges in Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. He denies lying to the feds. Catherine Herridge reporting live from Washington.
We have new information this morning from inside the federal court here in Washington. The judge, Amy Jackson, setting a target date for sentencing of March 5th. Paul Manafort's legal team arrived this morning at the courthouse for the short hearing without speaking to reporters. The special counsel now has until December 7th, until next week, to explain allegations that the plea deal fell apart because Manafort lied and did not fully cooperate. Special counsel prosecutor Andrew Weissman said they are considering more criminal charges against Manafort, including offenses he admitted to but was never charged with. Manafort's team accuses the special counsel of pressure tactics and wanting information that their client does not have or cannot provide. Separately, Fox News has learned special counsel investigators pressed Manafort on the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting and specifically the involvement of the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. That Trump Tower meeting is back in focus with the Michael Cohen plea, the plea from the president's former personal attorney, because Cohen acknowledged negotiations over the Moscow real estate project were happening at the same time as the Trump Tower meeting, though there's no public evidence of a connection at this time, Shep.
Catherine, we're watching another hearing in Washington. This time it involves the former FBI Director James Comey. Lawyers for Comey are asking a federal judge to throw out a subpoena from House Republicans demanding he testify in front of the House Judiciary Oversight Committees next week. The former FBI Director's legal team says he's perfectly willing to talk to them, but he wants to do it in public. He says a closed-door hearing could lead to selective leaking. What about that, Catherine?
That's right. Comey's lawyers are still in court at this hour fighting this congressional subpoena to answer questions under oath behind closed doors about his actions during the 2016 presidential campaign, including the Clinton emails, the Clinton Foundation, and the catalyst and the early stages for the Russia investigation. His attorneys accused Republicans in court filings of issuing the subpoena as part of, quote, a poisonous combination of presidential tweets and the selective leaking that has become standard practice. The committee's Republican chairman, Bob Goodlatte, said today the pushback makes clear Comey doesn't want to answer detailed questions.
He is trying to run the clock on us, and that's why we think he's filed this motion to quash. They also, Fusion GPS also tried that. They were knocked down, and instead he came in, Glenn Simpson came in and took the fifth.
Fusion GPS is the firm that was behind the anti-Trump dossier, and it is somewhat ironic that Comey is making accusations about leaking because his own decision to release memos to the media and kickstart the special counsel investigation is under probe by the Inspector General at the Justice Department right now.
Catherine Herridge reporting from Washington. Hackers may have stolen the personal information of as many as 500 million guests who stayed at one of the world's largest hotel chains. Marriott reports in some cases that includes credit card numbers, birthdays, addresses, even passport numbers. The Fox Business Network's Hillary Vaughn reporting live.
Hi, Shepard. Marriott says any guest that made reservations at a Starwood brand hotel on or before September 10th of this year could be caught up in this breach. This was not a one-time hit. They discovered outsiders had been grabbing information for years from this database. Hackers took information, including names, mailing addresses, but even passport numbers, your stay preferences that would be listed in your Starwood profile, even credit card numbers and expiration dates. Marriott says credit card info was encrypted, but there's no guarantee that it's protected. Marriott apologized for this breach in a statement, and they're working hard to make sure